All right. Hi, welcome to our Journal Club's special episode on IIT Integrated Information Theory. We have two very special guests here today. I am Mike. I'm a first year PhD student from T Lab in Monash. Um,
I can introduce myself as the other resident. My name's Kallum Robinson. I'm a previous student from Natsuchi's lab, also with Mike.
So my name is Francesco Ellia. I'm a postdoc. I'm a postdoc at ATR, and I also work under the supervision of now Tsuchiya. And I got my PhD from Bologna. I have a background mostly in philosophy, and during my PhD, I work with Giulio Tononi on the philosophical foundation of integrated information theory. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
And my name is Matteo Grasso. I work as a scientist in Madison, Wisconsin with Giulio Tononi. I've been there for 6 years now. And I'm also right now a visiting postdoc at ATR, working with now Tsuchiya for just 2 months here in Japan.
Great. I shall begin by in case if the audience doesn't know, we are talking about integrated information theory today. Now, integrated information theory is a very popular theory of consciousness, but many people have considered it to be a bit more esoteric. The purpose of this video is to really help me and Kallum to learn more about what it is, what prediction does it make, and what does it all means. So first, I will try my best to give a rough summary of what it is based on the new paper about IIT 4.0 by Albertenkus 2023. So first of all, unlike many other theory of consciousness, IIT, rather than looking at the brain and trying to figure out, which part of the brain must be responsible for consciousness, it starts from consciousness and trying to, in a sense, figure out what property must the brains have to be able to support our unique experience. So I think a good example is actually provided in the paper, where imagine that if you just wake up from dreamless sleep and you look around your room and several things become immediately obvious to you. Well, the first thing is that, of course, you have an experience of the room. The experience exists. Now, it sounds pretty straightforward, but it's actually a little bit more tricky than it first appears, because when IIT talk about what counts as real, what counts as existence, it requires a level of cause and effect powers. What does that mean? Well, it means that if something exists, it must be able to to make a difference to something else, and something else can also make a difference or affect it. So it's I think, very important aspect of IIT in general. A second thing that's immediately obvious to you is that the experience is for you and you alone. It's you are seeing the room, right? It's not for anybody else. Now that's the intrinsicality of our experience, as described. Now, another thing that's immediately true is that it's a very specific kind of experience, right? It's full of very specific informations in your visual experience. Now, that's the information axioms of IIT. And thirdly, well, actually, maybe fourthly, that instead of experiencing individual objects, you are experiencing everything as a whole. Your entire visual field, you experience it from the wall to the table to the bed. You experience everything as a unified experience rather than separate ones. And then another obvious aspect is that it is definite. And so it's only include what you have experienced and nothing more or nothing less, right? You don't experience what's behind you. you experience right in front of you, right? The room, the wall, so on and so forth. And finally, the experience is structured. So what do I mean by that is that it's, if you think about it, there are different objects, right? They are all, in a sense, distinct from each other, but they're also in relations to each other. For example, your body is on top of the bed, right? The bed is at this corner of the room. It's adjacent to the wall. Wall is distinct from the bed, but they are in a very specific spatial relationship in your experience with each other. So based on these axioms, IIT try to operationalize it. They try to figure out what property must the brain possess to correspond to these properties of our experience. So that's, as far as I understand it, which I don't understand, but as far as I understand it, that's the foundation of what IIT is. Anything I have mistaken or anything to add at this point?
Yeah, so I think there is a nice way to think about this. Like you mentioned, the example that is in the paper when you wake up from a dreamless sleep and you have this experience. And I think this is obviously a very pertinent example, but I think there can be an even better one in a sense that the very same things can be said about a dream itself, the experience of a dream. And I think this is important because often when we think about consciousness, we think about, for example, perception, and this is also because of historical reasons, right? So we think about perception, or we think about what consciousness allows us to do, right? But I think the very core of IIT's research question is about experience itself, about the fact that there is something that is to be like us, right? And and I think this, or at least for me, it can be appreciated even better when we consider things like dreams, where we are completely disconnected or almost completely disconnected from the environment. So we are actually doing nothing, and we are not perceiving the world actually, but we are in this sometimes amazing internal world of ourselves. So, and I think this is an important focus of IIT because it shifts the conversation on experience specifically, which is, yeah. I don't know if Matteo wants to add something.
No, not for now. I think it was very clear, correct what you said so far. So,
thank you. I do actually have a question about the exclusion principle. So I was talking about this experience is definite. It's nothing more, nothing less. But it's both intuitive in a sense and almost counterintuitive, I feel like. Because when you think about at least visual experience, of course, I don't see what's behind my head. But why would that be an interesting thing to consider? Why would it be of importance?
So maybe I can try to say something on this. So as you said very, very correctly, IIT starts from properties of consciousness that seem to be irrefutable through every conceivable experience. So essential. And one of these properties is that, and let's start from integration. Not only my experience has some content and it's all integrated, it's always one, right? I hear some things and I see some things, so I have a visual content of experience and auditory content of experience, but they are unified. I co-experience both of them. But now you can ask a further question, which is, why does experience have this content, right? Why is this whole? I mean, I could imagine easily that my experience was only the visual content or only the auditory content and not both. And similarly, you could imagine it could include more. We also know, of course, this is on the postulate side, on the neuroscience side. We know that there are some neurons in our brain right now that are monitoring our blood pressure, but there is no, most of the time at least, there is no phenomenal experience of that. So it is a legitimate question to ask, what defines what's in and out of my conscious experience, right? I don't know if this helps a little bit.
So just to repeat too, so that I can understand it, So it's not like we are trying to find a boundary of our experience in this axiom. So it's
Yeah. We're asking, why does it contain what it contains, right? Why is it not less? Why is it not only the visual content, but it is the visual and the auditory and the olfactory and the gustatory and the somatosensory? And similarly, we can imagine, why isn't it more than what it is? Why doesn't it include, for instance, the feeling of what's behind my back, or something like the feeling of my blood pressure or blood sugar level, even though we know that there are mechanisms in our brain that are monitoring for those things.
And I think even like we can push it even further, like by staying at the axiom level, we could, I think a legitimate question would be why right now I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing and not also a pink elephant, which is obviously absurd, right? But since we want to start from first principle, I believe this kind of questions kind of make sense, because we want to say why this exactly this and not more, because I could obviously experience a pink elephant, like I have this possibility, but I'm not experiencing it right now. So I think this sort of definiteness is what the exclusion axiom also is at.
Okay. Yeah, I think I understand. Just further one question, if I may. Doesn't the information, maybe I didn't understand it correctly, but didn't the information axiom, in a sense, covers the boundary of our experience in that sense, because it's specific, right? Our experience. So it only contains this information and nothing more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they are, of course, connected, and you can even see historically the axioms got sort of like refined, and in IIT 1.0 and 2.0 there weren't even 5 axioms. There were just like integration and information or differentiation, you know. And then I think we think now it's better to actually characterize information and exclusion separately, just like it is more correct to characterize existence and intrinsicality separately, which is a change from 3.0. There was intrinsic existence. It was sort of like clumped at one. In particular, the difference between information and exclusion is that information just tells you that experience is specific. So you can say the content is specific. It is not vague or, you know, undefined. But it sort of it has specific content, but it doesn't tell you exactly what content. So it is more like, yeah, it's specific in a sense of it is this experience and not that other experience, right? Or any other possible experience, which is differentiation, is the other sort of side of the coin of information. But it doesn't tell you why it contains what it contains and not less or more. Even being specific, right? It could still contain less than what it contains. And so exclusion plays the role of answering this further question.
Okay, I think I understand. Any question from Kallum about the axioms, or?
Not on this point. I think I have more questions when we get to discuss the figures and some more of the methodology. I'm really interested in the TPM and the past context and future context. But if we get there, we get there.
I mean, we will get right into it. If I may share the screen, I will try to. So what we found very interesting in the paper is some of the figures. It kind of illustrate the axioms in a much more specific way. It's operational. So we will start there.
Before
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Before getting there, maybe is it worth to spend some extra words? Because as you rightfully said in the introduction, sometimes IIT feels a little bit esoteric or less conventional than other scientific approaches. But I think there is something very important to say on why we start from the axioms and how do we get to the postulate that we are about to look into. And this is in the paper is on page on page 6. When we when there is this box about methodological guidelines of IIT, and essentially I think this is worth maybe spending some extra words on, and so the fact that we start from experience is given because as you mentioned, like experience is in a sense the only things that we are directly, our own experience is the only thing that we are directly acquainted to. And from there, we actually make inferences on the physical worlds. So as you mentioned, like IIT doesn't start looking into the brain because the brain, no matter how well we characterize it scientifically, mathematically, experimentally, but the brain is still like our knowledge of the brain is still kind of inference on a physical system that isn't there in the world, right? So in order to operate, so to say, IIT starts from experience, and I like to use this as an intuition pump. Of course, it's not the technical term, but it's sort of retro-engineer experience, right? Like experience is the way it is, so there might be some properties that are necessary for implementing this kind of thing. But this per se is not really sufficient to jump into the physical world, so to say. So there are these three, I think, very important assumptions, methodological assumptions that are realism. So the assumption that the mind, that there is a mind-independent reality that is not that exists only upon us. So basically a rejection of solipsism, and this rejection is on methodological reasons. So solipsism is not useful because it doesn't explain anything. And we actually want to explain certain aspects of subjective experience. And then there is this assumption of operational physicalism. So this talking in terms of cause and effect power, that what exists is what we can interact with, which is something that is extremely basilar in a sense, right? Something that is like, I think the only and most accepted view that every scientific field endorse, even though maybe not so explicitly, right? And finally, there is this assumption of operational reductionism or atomism, which I think this is very interesting. Maybe we can talk about it later if you want, but the idea is that we can partition and observe a system in its smallest component. So again, this is something that is extremely common throughout every scientific field. Like you want to understand the system, you want to understand a whole, you divide it in its component and you study the component often as at the smallest scale you can reach. So I think this, like by adding this assumption to the axioms, it becomes a little bit clearer why the postulates are formulates in the way they're postulates, and we can look at the picture now. Sorry for the digression.
No worries. Actually, I do have since we're already here, I do actually have questions regarding some of it, especially perhaps atomism. So just to clarify, when we are talking about this reduction, we are talking about in the physical world, right? Or are we talking about in our own experience? We are trying to find some sort of basic unit of experience. That's not what we are talking about. No. Oh.
Sure. No, this assumption is specifically about the physical world. So like again, we start by assuming that there is a mind-independent reality. We then add that this mind-independent reality is physical in the broadest sense of the term, so cause and effect power, something that we can observe, manipulate, and interact with in a rather consistent and regular way. And then we add this this assumption of reductionism, which this mind-independent physical reality can be partitioned in smaller units. So, for example, let's imagine a brain. It can be divided, roughly speaking, in brain areas, and then brain areas can be divided in I don't know, like a neuronal column, and then within you can find neuron, then you can find even subcomponent of a neuron, and then go down to the smallest physical scale. And in principle, you could study the system at every scale that you're interested into, right? So, but again, here we're talking about a physical system, so something that can be characterized in cause and effect terms, and not experience per se.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, if we have no more questions, let's move to.
I think before we do the figure, it would be good to have sort of this idea of the TPM like locked down, because I think that's pretty big for figure 1 and 6 especially. And I think on that, I'm quite curious. So I agree that operational physicalism is like the most having a cause and effect, or that it takes and receives something is a very essential signature of physical existence. But I'm really curious how we capture that in such a TPM. So as I understand it, that it's a probability influenced by all that's come before about all that can come in the future of a particular system, so to say. And I'm curious in this because if I can imagine, say, a unit TPM, which I suppose is representing a single neuron, is that right to assume in the case of the brain?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the grain, but it is one of the options, of course. It could be single neurons, it could be mini columns. Sure.
So we could just like hypothetically take some. With the future probability of potentially this neuron firing or having some feature of activity, say we take a motor neuron or a descending neuron, would that not be influenced by whether or not the broader system intends to move a limb or something that it fires? And so how does that influence the way we calculate a TPM to be observed, like in an instance, necessary, I suppose, for these sorts of calculations?
Okay, I can
if that makes sense as a question.
Sure. No, it's a very good question, and you point out correctly that the TPM is the core of everything, right? We start from the TPM, everything is, in a sense, comes out of the TPM. That's what we compute. So I would like to make clear that there are 2 levels at which we can, actually 3 levels at which we can discuss the role of the TPM. So one is, in principle, we are basically taking this physicalist stance and saying, well, if we want to characterize a physical system that is allegedly, our bet is that it might be the substrate of consciousness, we want to characterize it in physical terms, which really means operationally we want to interact with it and be able to manipulate it and observe what that thing does, right? So we want to have the least possible assumptions on what it means for something to exist physically. And as you said, we use this idea of cause-effect power. It's just like something must be able to take a difference from us and make a difference to us. So I have to interact with this thing and observe a change. If I can't make a difference to this thing and I can't observe a change, then I don't even know if there is something in front of me. So the simplest possible way to actually characterize something that exists physically in an operational sense is really just assuming it has a state. It could be binary, on or off, or 1 or 0, and it has some probability of changing this state, right? I can observe whether it changes state with a specific probability above chance. So if we were to, of course, if we wanted to study a system in full, the idea of IIT is that we would have to characterize it in terms of units and their probability to change their state. Now, like you point out correctly, you already somehow anticipate what is going to come with the postulates because you're asking, well, how do I even define what the system is and whether, the system is only the brain or something interacts with it from the outside, or I want to move my arm and therefore there's interactions that go on the effect side. When we create the TPM, we are basically pretending we know everything about a little universe that, let's say, is only 10 units or 3 units. And the idea is that if we really want to compute what exists and the substrate of consciousness, we need to be able to describe this little system in full, in physical terms. And this corresponds to having the TPM of our little universe, which is a map of all the possible nodes and all the possible ways in which these nodes change their state. Okay, so now the TPM is supposed to be a description of the full universe. So in your example, this would have to be a description of, the entire person with the environment around it. So all the atoms in the room, so to speak, in that corner of the universe are mapped into the TPM. And then once we start the computations via team, we will ask, okay, what exists? Well, we just said this TPM, which means this many units with these many states and these probabilities of turning on and off. And then as a subset, we can ask the question, is there a conscious entity here? Is there more than one? How many? And what are they conscious of? So I don't know if this helps, but the idea of the TPM is, going a little further in mathematizing the system we start from, and then we can do all the computations. Now, this is maybe one of the 2 things that I said. There's at least 3 ways in which we can understand a TPM. This is the most theoretical idea of TPM as describing our universe. Then there is a more pragmatic approach, which is the TPM just describes a system that we're interested in, that we assume is isolated from the rest of the environment, right? And then there is a third, very pragmatic approach, very experimental approach, which is we can think about the TPM as an approximation of a description of brain dynamics. So we can say we have some neurons. We don't know exactly how they change state in all possible ways, under all possible circumstances, but we have a good approximation of how probable it is of the brain entering one state given a past state, and what is the most likely state that follows a state of the brain.
And when you say state here, you mean like I guess like patterns of neural activity, not necessarily a state of consciousness. So
Yes.
There would be the pattern of activity somewhat associated, supporting by physical substrate of, moving a limb or thinking a thought or receiving some visual stimulus.
Yeah, correct. We can take one moment, one snapshot of experience. It has to be the shortest, right? Because we just want to explain your conscious experience right now. And then let's say there is an experience of red here and a sound the desire to move a limb, and this will correspond to some neuron being firing, some neuron being silent, some neuron being bursting.
So it's the probability of that system having a certain pattern of activity, thus correlated with red in this corner, desire to move a limb in 1 second here, or these sorts of other things. It's not the probability that in the future it will be that. It's the probability that we could guess that that's the activity it is now in this time instance, this snapshot that the TPM captures.
So no, it captures. So if I have a state of the system, right? It captures the probability. So you basically can take the current state of the system as being either one row or one column of the TPM. Actually, every state of the system will be a row and a column of the TPM. And then you can, in the TPM, you can find the probability that this state came from any other possible state of the system. In this case, you're taking current state as being the output, and you're saying my column describes the probability that this state came from all these other states. And if you take instead the current state as a row in TPM, you will take it as the input state, and the TPM describes the probability that the system will enter any other possible state, given that this is the current state.
Right.
So if you take if you start from a specific experience, this corresponds to a specific state of the system, which will be a column and a row of the TPM. But the TPM as a whole is a description of the system,
yes,
regardless of the state it is in. Yeah, it's supposed to be a full description of the system with any possible transition, right?
Right.
Which
that's nice. Yeah.
You can already see probably how it incorporates this idea of pure, bare, raw cause-effect power, we call it, which really means if the TPM is all 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, that basically means that the system doesn't make a difference to itself. Like whatever state can lead to whichever other state, right? But if you have different probabilities of some states bringing to some other states, it means that some units being on or off make a difference to some other units or the same units being on or off. So there is some very basic notion of raw cause-effect power. The idea of IIT is then to refine this raw cause-effect power, which is captured by the TPM, and then make it intrinsic, make it specific, make it unified, make it maximal or definite, and then making it structured. So these are, you apply the postulates one by one on the TPM to do exactly that.
Nice.
It may be a good time to talk about the graph itself, just because I think it may be actually a very good example of what we have just talked about. So if my understanding is correct, let's say we have 3 units, A, B, and C. They each could be in capital A or lower A. So each could be in 2 states. And the TPM will essentially describe they have all the possible states that these 3 units can be in, the input state as well as the output state. The current state is lower A, capital B, capital C, as marked here. Now, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, but I feel like it may actually be better to look at these 2 graphs as a sort of clear examples if we consider cause and effect separately. Right? If we only look at cause, we can say, hey, this is the current state. What previous state leads to the current state? And this is the probability distribution. Then we look at the effect. We say, hey, this is the current state. What would the future state look like in terms of probability? And then we have another. What I'm interested in, however, I suppose, is regarding the integrated information as an idea, right? So, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the integrated information is, as we can see here in the C portion, is derived from the probabilities of this matrix. Is that correct? And there are 2 components to it. One is selectivity, the other is informativeness. And okay, maybe I should stop.
Sure. Okay. So something about intrinsicality and the cause and effect TPM is the first question. The second question is about just a measure of integrated information. Did you want to say something, Francesco?
No, I just wanted to. Sorry. I just wanted to clarify that sure, figure B is a good example of what we were saying, but as shown in the picture, this only consider AB as a subset of the entire system, and C is treated as a background condition. So it's actually it's a different case in a sense, right? Not properly a different case, but like it's a sub case of the first picture, which on the contrary takes into account all the states of the system. So that's the full what we could call the full TPM of the system, right? And I just wanted to add this clarification because maybe people that watch will miss this detail.
Yeah, I can comment a little more on this. So just like Francesco said, it's important. I think, I'm not sure in what Mike said, it was implied, but there is an important step between existence and intrinsicality, which is the TPM is not purely, we don't just take the full TPM and divide it in 2 and focus on the input side and the output side. The TPMs are actually different, and what changes is that we have fixed some background conditions. So like we said before, in existence, we are assuming that our universe is only 3 units, of which we know everything about. We know the TPM of the universe, right? We know all the probability distribution and how they change. Now we ask the question, well, what if I don't want to take my entire universe as my candidate substrate of consciousness, but I just want to take a subset of it? Like instead of unit ABC, I just want to focus on units AB. So when I ask the question about the probability distribution of only unit AB, and I want to fix C as a background condition, this basically results in me ignoring the causal contribution of unit C to the state of units AB. So in practice, this implies that I am fixing the state of C. I'm saying C doesn't matter for what's going on in AB. I want to causally, sort of pin it. And then this is the operation of causal conditioning. So I only focus on AB. Now, this results in 2 different TPMs, because when I ask the question, what is the probability that AB goes from any state to any possible state, given that C was in a specific state, or what is the probability that AB will go into any possible state, given that C is, in a state right now? The answer might be different than the one that I get from the full TPM. So this is, I just want to say, I don't know how deep you want to go in this. This is kind of one of the most sort of like tricky mathematical details of IIT. I also want to mention right now, maybe we can talk about it later, that between the publication of 4.0 and now, actually a week ago, we released our IIT wiki. And this is one of the steps where basically we spend more time explaining exactly how you get the cause and the effect TPM from the system TPM. So if the viewers also want to, consult the IIT wiki, this would be in the unfolding technical part. There are some slideshows that tell you exactly, step by step how to get the cause and the effect TPM from the system TPM and why they are different, why the numbers are different, right? The second question you asked about integrated information. So to really boil it down to the core, integrated information is really just, you need one formula. And the backbone of this formula is basically P log P over Q. We like to say P log P over Q. Now, P, the first probability, is the probability that is the selectivity factor. So you're correct in saying selectivity. And then you have log P over Q. This is our informativeness factor. And the P is usually the constrained probability or unpartitioned probability. And the Q, the one that is a denominator, is either the unconstrained probability, meaning the one that we get when we consider the system being, let's say, completely unconstrained because we want to measure how much information there is, or it is the partition probability, which is the one that we consider when the system is partitioned because we want to measure how integrated the information is. So in these 2 cases, this quantity is intrinsic information and integrated information that you can compute on both the cause and the effect side. They come out of the same formula. You just change the probabilities that you are comparing to each other with this metric that is, in this case, this intrinsic distance matrix.
Would it be all right if I try to come up with an analogy to see if my understanding is correct? Let's say we only have 2 units, just A and B, okay? A can be in 2 state, B can be in 2 state. Let's say they're in a specific relationship where they are always the same as each other. A always the same as B, B always the same as A in terms of state. So in that case, if we think about the unconstrained probability of state, any individual state would be around 25% probability because there are 4 possible states in the unconstrained world, assuming there's no relation. So any state would be in 25% probability. However, if we consider the relationship between the 2, that they always copy each other, then it either boson or both off. So each state would be like a 50% probabilities, because it's one out of two possible states. And the difference between the constrained and unconstrained sort of is at least a portion of the integrated information. Is that a way to understand it?
Yes. So that's this is a good example. If you allow me to refine your example and make it even more intuitive, I like to think about this case that you describe. Imagine you have two traffic lights, right? One turns red when the other one is green, and they just flip, like they basically have opposite states, right? Okay, so you can ask the question, how much information I have in this system, meaning you can ask, by taking a snapshot of the system in one state, let's say 1, 0, how well can I predict what the past state was and what the future state will be? And in this case, if the system is purely deterministic, right, you can say, well, the probability is 1. If the system is state 1, 0, there was probability 1 that it came from 0, 1, and probability 1 that it will be in the opposite state. So now you can compute how much information every state of the system has by comparing the fact that you can predict with probability 1, one of the 4 possible states that the system came from and is going to go, by comparing instead, exactly like you said, the fact that if I didn't know anything about the system and the system was purely random, then I would have a 0.25 chance of coming from anywhere and going from anywhere. So these are exactly the two quantities that you compare when you compute intrinsic information. You are comparing, in this case, this probability 1 of one state compared to probability 0.25 or of any state. The difference, of course, is that, and again, here it becomes a little technical, but since consciousness is specific, you are not comparing the probability distribution of the system when it is constrained, like the two traffic lights, working fine, and the probability distribution of the system with all the wires scrambled, where every state is probability 0.25. So there's a difference between comparing a probability distribution with a 1 and then 0, 0, 0 probability and probability distribution with 0.25 everywhere, to comparing instead the information that my state on is compared to this state having probability 0.25. And a big change from 3.0 to 4.0 is exactly going from the idea that you can compare probability distributions to the fact that since consciousness is specific, you have to pick a state, so to speak, that is the one that really explains why consciousness is specific in this way, and it's not in any other possible way that it could be. So this is just to say that information allows you not only to compare or to compute the information that every state of the system has about its cause and its effect, but also to pick the specific state that the system specifies maximal information about.
I'm not fully grasping it, but I think I understand the rudimentary aspect. Is it related to the selectivity that was mentioned in the paper, where it's comparing one state, the concentration of cause-effect power over states, specific states?
Yes, correct. So selectivity is one of the two factors. If we go on the figure, and I don't think you can see my mouse, but what I'm trying to say is that if we focus on panel C, the current state on the cause side, right? We get the TPM on the left side. We have the current state of the system is A of B on. Yeah. So now, if we take the full column, right, of the current state being A of B on, we can ask the question, what is the probability that the system was in state AB or off or on all the states? We are basically asking the question, this system being in state off on right now, what is the past state that it specifies the maximal information intrinsically from its own perspective about? And we can do this calculation of intrinsic information for every row, right? We are showing the result of a candidate cause state that is the one highlighted in red. So A on, B off, that gives us this square that is then the one that we use to do the computation and results in intrinsic information being 0.84. But we could have done it for any other candidate cause state, right? All the rows in this TPM. So the idea is that every conscious experience picks, selects a candidate, a cause that is the one that it specifies maximal information about, and likewise on the effect side. So the calculation that you say is done for every candidate state, but then one is selected as the maximal state. And this is exactly what information does and why it's called specificity.
So just to repeat, so if it's essentially consider the entire column, and then it says there are like 4 possible previous state that can lead to current states, but the distribution, of course, is not even. It's extremely likely that previous state it's capital A and small b. There are some possibility it's both small b and small a, but it's since capital A and small b is most likely we compute only the integrated information related to this specific state. Okay, I think I understand.
Yeah, so the system selects the past state, the cause state, about which it specifies maximal intrinsic information, which is in this case the cause state A on, B off.
And this what is this light shaded bar to its left? So you have
So these are the 3 quantities that Mike was talking about. One is selectivity. The other one is the probability that enters the computation of informativeness. So one is just how probable was that state. And then the gray bar is, in this case, the unconstrained probability, the one under, let's say, uniform distribution. Or if I assume that I didn't know anything about the system, what would be the probability of this state?
Right. Yeah.
And Mike already mentioned why selectivity is important, and you said it well. It's to really see how much this causal power is diluted and how much it is concentrated over one specific state.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the intrinsic perspective of the system. So that's a key factor of intrinsicality applied to information.
All right. Shall we move on to integration? Because to be honest, I understand integration even less. I know we are doing something about severing the connections between A and B, as represented by little scissors over here. And then we are trying to see what has changed in terms of the TPM, I believe, and then we can derive a phi value from it. Is that the rough understanding of it?
Yes. Okay, if you allow me to go back to the analogy of the traffic lights, which is my favorite one because it kind of hopefully clarifies things. So we just said that if we have 2 traffic lights, their state, we can say it's correlated, right? It's perfectly correlated. When one is on, the other one is off, etc. And we also said that if we apply a measure, well, even a measure of Shannon information in a sense, we can say every state of this system is informative because it rules out other states. So for instance, I can ask, if the first traffic light is on, I know with probability 1 that the other one is off, right? So there is some information which is above chance. If it was completely random and they were turning on and off at random, I wouldn't be able to say anything about the state of one given the other, or about the future state of both given their current state. IIT makes this measure of information intrinsic by doing exactly what we described so far. But basically the idea is, from the point of view of the system of the 2 traffic lights, being in a state, how much does it constrain the past, the probability of the past state and the probability of the future state being one specific state? So now we said that the traffic lights constrain their past and future states. So there is some information. Now the question is the information integrated? And you can think about it this way. Let's say there is a wire between the 2 traffic lights, right? And they work well. Now we inject some noise in the wire, we scramble the connection, and nothing changed in the system. They keep, turning on and off, alternating. So we could infer that actually the two traffic lights are not causally interacting with each other. They're just on a clock. They're just synchronized and they just do their thing. So the idea is that there is information, but information is not integrated. It's not causal. It's not one system. They're just doing their thing and they happen to be correlated. So the same thing that we did in information when we compared the amount of information in the system when it works well, compared to instead when we noise all the connection and we assume we know nothing about the system. Now we can do the same thing by asking how much the information of the system deteriorates when we cut some of the connections between the nodes. And the idea is that if we can basically make at least one cut that makes absolutely no difference to the system, then the system is not really integrated, right? There is one way to cut some things that makes no difference. The converse is that if there is no cut that makes no difference to the system, so every time we mess up with the connections, we screw up the information that is being specified by the system about itself, then the system is integrated, and at least part of this information is integrated information. So the parts are not independent from each other. They are constraining each other. And now to get to the actual formalism, we do a similar comparison like before. So this time, since we already found the maximal state about which the system specifies information, we don't check the other states. So we take our current state, AB, being off on, right? And let's say on the cause side, we have our caused state, A on, B off, that the system specifies maximal information about. We found this state in the information step. Now we are comparing basically the probability that the past state was A on, B off, given the current state of the system when all the connections are intact, to the probability that that very same state was the cause state of the system when we actually partition some of the connections of the system. In this case, there's many ways to partition the system. We have to try all of them and see the one that specifies, basically affects the minimal information partition is the one that affects the system the least, because basically we want to find a way to partition the system that makes no difference to figure out whether it is not integrated. So now that you can notice that the three bars, the light bar, light red, dark red, are actually the same, but the bar that changes is the gray one. So before we compared our probabilities of the intact system with the probability of the system when we assume full randomness, when we assume no information, right? No constraint. Now we compare the probability of the system in working order when there are constraints compared to a cut version of the system where we are noising only some connections. So we're asking, okay, there is information, but is this information due to actual interactions between the units of the system? And which connections in particular are important?
I assume it will be one cut at a time, right?
Yes, a cut is a very abstract mathematical notion. I can cut as many connections as I want in one go. So I have to consider all of the ways to partition the units. I can, even if you have connections, bidirectional connections, I can imagine cutting only one direction but not the other. I can separate this unit from these three, this unit from these two, like all the possible partitions.
Mm-hmm. I can see why computationally it would be difficult. Okay.
Yeah. And I suppose in the brain, which I suppose we're all trying to approximate in this, is that this is also why neurons that aren't presently on are likely to impact the conscious state, because it's not just necessarily about their activity, it's about the way that they, like their ability to communicate between each other. I'm interested, I suppose, if we like try and think of this thought like practically, I suppose this is why the posterior cortical hot zone is like the focus for IIT, the greatest area of integrated information. Because of course, any small change here dramatically affects the visual system, for example. Like you can very small, we know that we can remove sections of the brain, like the cerebellum, and not have large disruptions to conscious experience. But small changes here in the posterior cortical hot zone will result in large changes. I'm curious if like how maybe this line of thinking like separates what changes if we have a lesion in like the posterior cortical hot zone and my visual field is disrupted. Does that make any change maybe to my inner mental world or my kind of conscious experience of this? Because I'm still able to perfectly have an inner mental world or a complicated conscious experience of it. Even if there is a aberration to my visual or my sensory processing, my visual field. I'm curious how that is as a change to whether or not my system is integrated or capable of conscious experience.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So there's some things to say probably. So one is that there are changes to the substrate that most likely only impact the content, the qualitative content of experience. So for instance, if you lesion visual cortex, your consciousness largely is unaffected in the sense that you are still one subject of experience with a rich experience, etc.
Sure.
But some of the cortices that are contributing some specific contents of experience are going to be, of course, affected. So your vision might be affected, but maybe no other modality, no capacity to think, etc. But then, as you say, you can imagine some other more complex conditions where instead there are just bigger changes to your experience, and you can imagine some things that maybe affect your, well, actually visual space is interesting because we use space as a metaphor for so many things, and we know that, for instance, people who don't have normal vision, they reconceptualize a lot of the spatial and the sounds. They perceive them very differently, right? They experience sounds very differently, maybe with more of a spatial quality to them rather than visual space. So losing one modality might enhance other ones, and it might also inform concepts that you use to talk about your experience. This is very complicated territory.
Yeah, true. No, of course. I'm curious in the way it's kind of resolved in that, because it's, I guess, in thinking of these integrated brain regions and that we cannot kind of disrupt them. And we're trying to explain also in IIT that certain systems are more conscious than others, or maybe some animals with less integrated information do not have as rich a conscious experience or capable of potentially so rich a conscious experience as maybe we are. Maybe there is something far beyond us as well. And I guess in light of that, yeah.
You are actually anticipating the goal of figure 6 and the following figures is really to show what happens when you do disrupt connectivity, and also when you change the state. And also, like you said, why, according to IIT, there are some substrates that are more conducive to integrated information, such as the grids that are present in posterior cortex, and why other substrates, for instance, the cerebellum, which is modular, are not, precisely because from their architecture, you can already see, even, before going through the whole IIT formalism, that there are some clear ways to, for instance, partition the system that make no difference to the system as a whole. And that's why some approximations of phi can also be, of course, developed to find the minimal cut without having to go through all the possible cuts, because in some cases it's evident that there is a fault line, right?
It's actually it's already 4 o'clock. So do we still have time to do another figure, or shall we wrap it up here? What do people think?
I'd probably have about half an hour personally, and then I'll have to go. But I have much less to offer than
Sure,
Matteo.
we can continue for half an hour maybe, and then we can pick it up the next time if you want to have another episode.
Well, all right then. Shall we talk about exclusion? I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. I was slightly lost here on this on precisely what exclusion here was trying to show me, and how C in isolation seems to have a higher value, but I might just be interpreting the figure wrong.
I'm happy to comment on this. Also, being the person who created the figure, I am to blame if you didn't understand it. So the idea is that, again, we have assumed that our entire universe is only 3 units, right? And we designed this case so that the complex, the subsystem with the highest integrated information, system integrated information, would be not the full system, not ABC, but it would just be AB in this case. So what we show here is, in intrinsicality, we ask the question, what is the integrated information of our candidate substrate of consciousness AB? We didn't know it would turn out to be the maximum, right? So we computed information, we found the cause and effect state that is picked by AB, and then we computed the integrated information. So we found the associated system integrated information value that AB specifies as a unified whole. But then, of course, we have to ask the question, we could have picked any possible subset of ABC. We could have picked, A alone, B alone, C alone, or we could have picked BC or AC. And we actually, of course, have to go through all the possible subsets when we do the computation of integrated information. And what we show in panel E is the outcome of this computation. So in this case, if we picked only, let's say, A as a system instead of AB, we would have found that the system integrated information was 0.04. It turns out that A, B together have a higher system integrated information of 0.17. So we know that A doesn't exist as a complex, but AB does. But also, we didn't know that AB was a complex, was the maximum, until we computed ABC as, a candidate substrate of consciousness. In this case, we discovered that ABC as a candidate system has a system integrated information of 0.13, which is lower than AB. So we concluded that AB is, in this case, it's a complex. But it turned out that actually, if we consider C alone, we would have found a higher value of integrated information in this case. Of course, in the brain, it's unlikely that if we compute the integrated information, I don't know, of some bulb or some piece of the deep brain or the spinal cord, well, maybe we would find some integrated information. It could be a separate complex, right? But it wouldn't be the main complex, which we know is the one that corresponds to our experience. So in this case, the idea is that there can be no part of a system that just doesn't exist and is not either a complex in itself or it's part of another complex. In this case, we decomposed our universe of units ABC into 2 complexes, one that is AB and one that is C. And they, of course, don't overlap. Otherwise, that would violate exclusion. So that's the goal of the figure.
That does make a lot of sense. It's a very I know, I think the interpretation is on me here. It's an excellent figure.
I suppose a rudimentary question that I think some people may encounter is, why are we picking in the first place? Can't we just say they are all real, or they're all systems? Why must we pick?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry, probably not formulated very concisely, but why are we picking the maximum of phi in the first place? Why do we have to pick?
So Well, please go, Matteo.
Okay, so it comes from, again, from exclusion on the phenomenology side, the axiom, right? We said there must be a reason why my experience contains what it contains, and it is, for instance, not less. It's not just vision or vision plus olfaction, but not auditory experience, and also it's not more. And of course, one natural reason that we can imagine, which is in IITs formalized as the principle of maximal existence, is that the idea is that what exists is what exists the most in this case. If I am experiencing, so it wouldn't be a subset, there would be no reason why I'm experiencing less than what I'm experiencing. I can experience everything that is co-experienced in a sense. It's the maximum of what is co-experienced. So in this case, if we apply this measure throughout the brain, and we can find a lot of candidate systems, right? If we were to, for instance, apply integrated information measure to only one hemisphere, we will probably find non-zero integrated information, actually probably very high integrated information. But then the question is, if we also find that a superset of this system has integrated information, which of the two we pick as the real substrate of consciousness? There cannot be two consciousnesses that are overlapping. That would violate our idea that consciousness is definite, and therefore between the two, it seems natural to pick the maximum, right? And this is translated into the formalism by maximizing integrated information, so computing integrated information throughout and then picking the maximum. Now, your question, though, has a nuance, which is between A, B, and C, they're not overlapping, right? What do we say about C or A, B? Again, in this case, this is a very small system, so it's likely that a one unit with a self-loop system will have higher integrated information than two units. But in a system like the brain, it's very unlikely that something like a very, very small piece will have higher integrated information than the complex, for instance, the posterior areas. This said, IIT really doesn't say anything about other complexes that might exist in the body. If somebody brings up the possibility that there is a mini brain in the gut, IIT just says this is an empirical question. One thing that IIT can say is that is not the substrate of your consciousness. The one that you talk about when you move your mouth, that is not, doesn't contribute to that consciousness, because if we poke your posterior cortex, then you report directly changes in your experience. There are many perturbations that we can do to other parts of your body that do not result directly in changes in your experience, just like the cerebellum. So that's the reason why we focus on this main complex, but there could be other ones outside of the main complex there.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
And I think this could be also a very good moment to say or to clarify something that sometimes come up with IIT, which is the relationship between experience and functions, such as, for example, report. As this is something that me and Matteo also have been talking recently about, and sometimes it's misunderstood that for example, functions are irrelevant for IIT. And this obviously is not true, as functions, they do have a role. The main point, though, being that IIT postulates a double dissociation in principle between consciousness and functions and its functions. And therefore, it is conceivable in IIT that you could have conscious experience without any kind of functional aspect connected to it. As for example, maybe when you are in a very deep meditative state or in a minimal conscious state in neurological patients, and maybe some very let's say exotic kind of consciousness, such as, for example, I don't know, brain organoids, which we don't know if what's going on there, right? But if they're conscious, it could be that they have some kind of experience without any sort of related functions. But of course, functions are very useful for when we study consciousness. And for example, like a lot of experiments are built in a rather functionalist way, right? Like we study the way in which a subject, for example, reports, or you know, there are, for example, I'm thinking about the tennis paradigm, which has been extremely helpful in a clinical context. The point again is, to acknowledge the relevance and the usefulness of that aspects, but to dissociate it in principle from experience itself. And I think it's just it was just worth to underline that, because even recently at the ASCC, I think I've talked with some people, and this point came out quite often. So,
okay, very interesting. Shall we? Okay, maybe a good point before we run out of time completely to talk about the final figure we had. It's a little bit down. Nope, it's not. Yeah, yes. Figure 6. Oh. So it's probably a rather good example to showcase the exclusion principle we just talked about before. Based on the 5 value, we can tell that AB is a single complex as opposed to the CDEF or the individual ones. You can also see that I believe the cause effect structure graph on the right-hand side for both the AB system and all the other individual systems, they're all the same. Anyway, actually, right. And if my understanding is also correct, in this case, it's just 3 systems, each made of 2 elements, A, B, C, D, F, E, so on and so forth. What's kind of very interesting to me is the graph C, because they are technically all connected in a sense, right? And they are a big complex, but the cause effect structure is, it looks very simple, and the 5 value is very low, as opposed to the graph in D. There are a few more connections, no doubt, but the cause effect structure is tremendously more complex, and the 5 value is extremely large. So I'm kind of curious of why that is the case. What happened? What's the difference here?
Sure. So I think in the idea is really that IIT tries to account for both, you know, the quantity of consciousness and the content. And in this case, IIT 4.0 becomes more refined in finding a complex and finding when a system exists as one, but then ask the further question, what about its the structure part of experience, right? How much not only this system exists as one and it is integrated, and we have a measure of, so to speak, the weakest link that is what keeps the system together as one. But then we can ask, what is the information that is specified not by the system as a whole, as one, but also by all of its components, in this case, really every possible subsets of the mechanisms of the system. And you can find actually in this example that the 2 systems, the ring of copy gates, this is just a ring of copy gates that copy each other's state, is integrated. It exists as one. It is a complex. And the system integrated information, which is the small phi s star, is 1.74. So it is actually higher in a sense that the system integrated information of that exactly, of the second system. So in IIT 3.0, these two measures were combined. It was simplified. It was an attempt to use the content of experience to just measure how much a system hangs together as one unified entity, and then also measure the richness of information and specified by each individual subset of the system that in this case accounts for the structure of experience. In IIT 4.0, these two measures are separate, and it's interesting because it yields different results. Like you point out, systems can exist as unified, but when you actually look at the subsets, they can specify more or less integrated information. And this really accounts for the structure of the experience in IIT. So one thing maybe we can point out is that it is intuitive to see that both systems, there is no way to cut them that makes no difference to the system, but which is what's reflected on the left side. But by looking at each individual mechanism, which can be any subset of units, it is pretty self-evident in the case of the ring of copy gates that each unit really specifies only information about its predecessor and its successor, right? Whereas like a lot of subsets of units in system in panel D specify information about other subsets of units within the system. So that is really what captures the fact that they are both unified systems, but one specifies internally, there is this rich organization of the information that the system specifies about itself that corresponds to this giant structure with, in this case, 27 distinctions instead of only 6, and a very high number of relations compared to only 4 relations in the case of the copy gate.
How should I understand the graph on the right in terms of our own experience? Are we saying that, okay, so if it's simple, then it's conscious, but it's not, don't have that many kind of experience. But in this case, where it's tremendously complex, you can have all sort of potential experience that you can, well, experience. Is that the idea?
Actually, I think there is an important distinction that the cause effect structure does not refer to the system, but refers to the system in a state. So the cause effect structure is the cause effect structure of a system in a state, and therefore it matches with one experience only. I don't know if that's what you were meaning. So it's not that the system can have more or less experiences. It just means that the system in this state has one experience, if IIT is correct, obviously. And in the case of the C figure, this experience is extremely sparse. Like there are just a few distinctions with some minimal relations that. And in the case of figure D, this experience is much more richer, and there are countless of relations that probably are not even all represented in the figure, I'm not sure, and a lot of distinctions, and so it's much more richer, but it's still one experience only. So
I see. So it's the
it could be the case.
One experience.
No.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I was just saying that. So it's all about the content of one experience. Is it rich or is it sparse?
Yeah. So just to segue, so when we say experience, we mean one moment of experience, right? But you could, maybe that was implied by what you asked. We could also sometimes talk about contents of experience as experiences, in the sense that I can say right now I have an experience of red and an experience of the sound and an experience of the taste of coffee, all within my experience, my total experience right now. So Francesco, I think, was pointing out that these cause effect structure correspond to one global moment of experience, but there are a lot of contents, like qualitative, basically what philosophers call qualia, right? I can say, maybe your question was exactly asking, let's say right now I'm seeing red. on the screen, where is this little speck of red that I see in my visual field in the cause effect structure, and where is instead my feeling of hunger or something like that. So the idea in this case is that there are many mechanisms in the system. Let's say here we have our A, B, C, D, E, F node, system, just 6 nodes. Let's simplify and say AB is your visual cortex, and maybe A being on is a double opponent cells that is firing for a speck of red in this specific part of the visual field. And in the cause effect structure, that will show up by having some, for instance, A distinction with the mechanism A, specify a cause over, I don't know, unit B, and an effect over itself. So that will be what contributes this little content of your experience, redness in the visual field. It will be a little substructure of the cause effect structure. Then you will have another part of the cause effect structure that is, let's say, EF, that is contributing your feeling of hunger, for instance. But these will all be really not even nodes of the cause in this cause effect structure. They will be substructures. They will be multiple vertices connected to edges and faces, which are relations. So that's the idea of IIT. We should be able to map all contents of an experience, included extendedness of the visual space, of the bodily space, the feeling of the flow of time, the fact that you see colors, and maybe you might feel pain and emotions and thoughts. They should all be substructures of the cause effect structure if we were able to unfold the full substrate of experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. Any question from Kallum actually, or have I been?
No, it's been good. I'm very happy to listen to him. I understood most of this figure. The concept of these sort of unfolding structures makes sense given what I've been reading recently.
Right. I guess my final question is, of course, related to the difference between D and E when you actually start to sever them into 2 different systems. And we see this dramatic decrease in the complexity of the systems. I guess it's to be expected, right? We can also, because since small phi is also decreasing dramatically from previous graph, the big phi as well. So, not sure if I do that.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, I lost my train of thought halfway there. I was trying to make a comment that is very interesting to see how this complex structure being severed in half and the complexity just disappears. But yeah, I guess it's rather shallow observations on my part. I'm not sure if there's anything interesting really to talk about.
Yeah. So, sorry.
Oh, no.
Okay. Well, one goal of this figure is to show that. So in the previous figures, we basically showed that from the connectivity in these very simple systems, you can sort of already kind of guess, where your fault lines are, what complexes you have. Trivially, if you have modular connectivity, then you will have that your main complex splits, like there's all these little complexes. The goal of the panel E, just like D and actually C, is, so with C and D, we showed that you can have different architectures where you have one unified system. And in this case, when you have this type of connectivity, you can have different amounts of integrated information, in this case, big phi. So when you actually look at the structure unfolded, you can find differences in the structure. Figure E goes back to this idea that, well, actually, sometimes it might be very hard to find the fault line, and it might look like the system is all-to-all connected, just like in the brain. There is no clear, separation between posterior cortices and the front, to the point that, a lot of people think there is actually no reason to think that the main complex is in the back because everything is connected. The point, though, is that everything is connected over even outside of the brain, right? So we need a principal account to find, in this case, the borders. And in this case, the idea is that you can have a subset that is connected and specifies a richer structure, and then you can have another part that might also specify some integrated information, but in this case, much smaller. And it is supposed to mimic roughly the situation that could very well be happening in the brain, where you have some areas like maybe frontal areas or maybe the cerebellum, they might be integrated information, but to a level that is much, much lower. Which, by the way, would correspond to, for all intents and purposes, maybe the absence of consciousness, to the point that if you remove the cerebellum, then you have no changes. If you remove the frontal lobes, seems like people can still be conscious, and there are, of course, some changes in their behavior and their reasoning abilities, but a lot of other properties that are just like being there and experiencing, especially sensory modalities, are unaltered. We did in the, not really in the description of the figures and in the caption, but in the text, there is a little bit of a take-home message where these very highly simplified small systems are described in the context of neurophysiology, so and neuroanatomy. So those parts of the paper bridge the gap, so to speak.
I see. But in this case, though, specifically, since the small phi, it is larger if we consider it as a whole. The small phi is larger. So at least in this case, we actually should consider all these elements as a single system. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think Matteo probably should answer this question, as he's one of the author of the paper and he also made the pictures. But yes, I think that's exactly the point. So so this system, like I guess there is, if you look closely, there are some different weights in the connections, right? And so what the difference between D and E is that if you look at the subsystem of D, you won't find one that has bigger phi than the whole. While, as we have just seen in the figure E, this is exactly what happened. Like if you consider A, B, C, D, E, F, you actually notice that it has a lower phi than A, B, and F, and also C, D separately.
I see. I wasn't reading the graph very carefully. I think I made a mistake here. Yeah, they are not the same class. All right, I think that's it for us today. Time's up. If you are still interested in reading more about IIT, go read the wiki. We will post the link in the video description below. A lot of people spend a lot of hard work on it, so go read it. All right. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.